A lot has been made of the concept of death of the author. It's a concept that was introduced around 60 years ago by, you guessed it, a French author. It's something born out of the vagueness and love of abstraction that so thoroughly pervade French culture, and which, therefore, has become increasingly relevant as the postmodern plague grips the Anglosphere.
Because French.
The basic idea behind the death of the author is that an author's intent in writing a book, producing a TV show, or what have you no longer matters, and the only thing that does matter is the reader's interpretation. To a certain extent, this is correct. No author can fully control the interpretation that a reader takes from their creations. However, to say that the author is powerless is to deny reality, and attempts to do so, whether those behind them will admit it or not, are more based in personal disdain for the author than anything else. Just ask J.K. Rowling, who will give you all the sordid details while wiping her tears with fat stacks of pound notes. Due not only to the events of the past several weeks, but also becoming enlightened about a certain sordid state of affairs, I've been formulating my own concept, similar to that of the death of the author, but not quite the same thing. The death of the conspiracy theorist. No, I'm not talking about some particularly famous conspiracy theorist who died recently, nor am I claiming that all conspiracy theories are bunk. If anything, a lot of them have been more or less vindicated lately. For example, let us take the attempted assassination of Supreme Chancellor Trump, which the media is doing its utmost to make us forget. The attempt alone to memory hole this event should be enough to vindicate the conspiracy theory that undemocratic forces are working in undemocratic ways to keep him from entering office. If you didn't sit through the hearings that immediately followed it, I don't blame you. While the usual suspects, like the incredibly awful Rashida Tlaib, tried to turn the event into a racial issue to pander to their voter base, surprising people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez asked the now former director of the Secret Service direct, hard questions and would not accept her stonewalling as an answer. But stonewall she did, and without a hint of even the slightest fear or remorse in her voice. Not only that, she refused at the hearings to resign her post. The anger in these people's voices was palpable, and a couple days later, Cheadle did end up resigning. Pay close attention to what's going on here. Cheadle refused to resign at the hearings despite the vicious attacks she was receiving. She showed absolutely no guilt or remorse over her failures. Then, she backpedaled and resigned. Some of the people attacking her have referred to Trump and his supporters as Nazis. Are they really angry that Cheadle failed to protect him? Or did they actually plot to have Trump assassinated? You have to admit it certainly looks suspicious. Also, why was that the only Trump rally that played on CNN? And why did a New York Times photographer have a camera with a shutter speed high enough to capture the trajectory of a bullet? It just happened that way? Right. As I pointed out in my last article, these people were paving the way for an assassination on the former Supreme Chancellor out of fear of his re-election chances. But whether this was a coordinated effort, something they allowed to happen, or something they dropped the ball on, it doesn't matter. No, your boy Ari isn't becoming a nihilist, though with what I'm about to say, you could be forgiven for thinking that. Whether the assassination was a deliberate conspiracy, a lone gunman allowed to act, or a classic case of DEI in action, it doesn't matter because it failed. It also doesn't matter because right in front of our eyes, the people who would most benefit from Supreme Chancellor Trump dying have been trying to make us okay with such an eventuality. Those are the facts of the situation, and no conspiracy is going to change it. That's why, as fun as they are for me to think about, I don't throw much weight into conspiracy theories. I can understand why so many people do. What else but a hidden cabal of secret actors in noir-lit backrooms pulling every string imaginable in our lives would be a palatable pill to swallow when we discuss what's holding us back? I mean, we all know what the boomers would say. I'm not denying that such hidden cabals actually do exist, or even that they have so much power. Operation Mockingbird is, after all, a real thing, and it gives the managerial class tremendous power. But it doesn't give them infinite power. Infinite power is a delusion. Each of us has our own lives to manage, and nobody can monitor each of us closely enough to make sure that we comply at every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Even if you were deranged enough to want to hire enough people to do this, and many of the managerial class are, you'd need to hire half the country to do it. And what would you pay them with? So, the managerial class settles for the next best thing, convincing a small but loud sector of the population that they have the duty to spy on their neighbors, and selling people wiretaps to have in their homes, just as long as those wiretaps can also answer trivia questions or look up recipes for them. They didn't even need to strong-arm us with ingsoc to normalize this state of affairs. In all likelihood, Darth Moldbug was right when he said that this was not organized from the top down, but simply implemented in the fashion of the cathedral. I've made no secret of my admiration for Supreme Chancellor Nixon and the counter-revolution he waged to protect us from the ravages of Marcuse. The Watergate scandal that brought him down was the introduction of the left's new favorite instrument, one that they've used relentlessly against Supreme Chancellor Trump with little success: lawfare. For those of you who haven't fallen deep enough down the right-wing rabbit hole, this is just launching one lawsuit after another against your target until they give up. This interview is worth watching in full whether you care about the intricate details or not. Think about that for a moment. All these alphabet agencies, who supposedly run things behind the scenes, know things about you that nobody else does, and can kill you at any time and make it look like an accident, decided to resort to lawsuits of all things. True, Nixon was a lot more high profile than you or I could ever hope to be, and an accidental death would look quite suspicious. That lawfare is their preferred weapon is quite telling. It tells me that they are far less powerful than they want us to think. If they really were all powerful, they wouldn't need to bother with the fair part. They could fabricate charges, stack a jury, and coerce a judge. As time goes on, their methods are only getting more aggressive. Trump's attempted assassination, which, to my dismay, he has completely squandered as a campaign point, is another sign of their desperation. Lawfare failed, so they tried to take him out.
They don't have enough guards, and they know it. They're afraid. Right now, they're afraid.
Afraid? Afraid of what?
They just killed 100 men to keep them quiet. What would you call that?
I'd call that power.
Power doesn't panic.
Their grip on the public psyche is slipping, and they know it. What they don't know is how to stop it. What they don't know is that it can't be stopped. Due to the economic calculation problem, managerialism is not sustainable in the long term. Soft managerialism, think the Republic in its present form, can last slightly longer than hard managerialism, which are openly authoritarian regimes, but both are ultimately doomed to fail due to each individual's complexity. Why not hasten that fall? No, I'm not advocating a total collapse of the Republic, just of the managerial state. As Saul Alinsky said in the book he's so pilloried for, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. The Alphabet Agency's illusion of power, so carefully cultivated through the media, is starting to backfire on them. First, they were practically unknown. Then, they were seen as toppling foreign governments left and right for not going along with the Republic's agenda. Governments that, to be fair, committed serious human rights abuses, but that makes their methods no less shady and their motives highly questionable. Then, they sold us on the idea that they are people who work behind the scenes and get their hands dirty in ways respectable people are not willing to do. Then, they were seen as chaotic and engaging in warfare against the very people they were sworn to protect. Now, they're starting to be seen as desperate and incompetent. And they certainly are. It's not an intelligent sort of person who's attracted to managerialism. It's an ideology for people who are dumb enough to think that they can actually control others. Obviously, nobody who subscribes to it calls it managerialism, because good luck selling the general public on the idea of living forever under an omnipotent HR department. Those at the left end of the bell curve don't delude themselves into thinking they're smart enough to make decisions for others. Those at the right end recognize that other people are too complex to be ruled entirely by top-down authority. Those in the middle, however, underestimate human complexity and view it as something they can harness to their own ends. They're finally starting to wise up to just how badly their efforts have failed, and they're panicking. At the end of the day, there is no system. There is only a mass of self-important midwits who think they have a force-given right to run our lives for us. Those people are almost as vulnerable as we are. Make life hell for them, and you make life hell for the whole managerial class. If you know parents whose bitter, lonely teenage sons were groomed into becoming mass shooters or terrorists, encourage those parents to sue not the agencies that groomed them, but the individuals within those agencies. Bankroll their lawsuits as much as you can. Fundraise for them too. Prevent your own sons from falling down the same hole by teaching them their own self-worth and the importance of working on themselves before trying to attract girls. Restrict your kids from using smartphones and at the same time tell them exactly why you are doing it. This is, of course, the double-edged sword of both managerialism and anti-managerialism. You can do those things, but you can't make other parents do them. This sort of resistance has to come from the ground up, or it has no chance of working. I'm confident it will, but we need to put in the work on our end. Even with all these precautions, this only solves part of the problem. The reason the managerial state had an opening to begin with is because it had a vacuum to fill. Our souls long for connection with the metaphysical, with the unseen world. It's not a coincidence that the rise of the managerial state coincided with a decline in religiosity. After what I've seen from the Vatican of today and countless evangelical conferences, I'm somewhat hesitant to tell everyone to go back to church, but find something that satisfies that part of you. Create art, literature, and media if you're so inclined. Read not just nonfiction, but fiction as well. Read your children fairy tales. Build something new. And remember the words of Chesterton. The Romans didn't love Rome because she was great. Rome was great because the Romans loved her. And as Darth Dave said, we can't purge our way out of this. we can only build our way out. So get to building, and may the Force serve you well.